you all for coming out this evening. I appreciate your time. There's a lot of different things you could be doing this evening. I guess there's a Seahawk game on, which is where I would be if I weren't here. So thank you for choosing to come here this evening. We do have a brochure, pamphlet, handout that has all of the candidate statements for this forum and for the City Council forum that is coming up in 2 weeks. So if you would like to take that with you or have one with you this evening, Marco was handing those out in the foyer, and you can grab another one on the way out if you'd like to go. Tonight's event is hosted by Education Hill Neighborhood Association. We do have a Facebook page and a website. That information is also on your handout. My name is Paige Norman, and I will be your moderator this evening. If you could please take a moment to silence your electronic devices. That way we don't have any distractions for our candidates. Tonight's forum is being recorded and will be posted on social media. The Redmond Reporter is also live streaming this evening and may be sharing questions from their live audience as time allows. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for opening statements, 3 minutes for closing statements, and 2 minutes for response for any of the questions, unless it's a question I think is going to need longer for an answer. At our school board forum, we did have a couple of questions that were pretty detailed, and they had a pretty detailed response, and so I did allow them a little extra time. I've told my timer to put the shepherd's crook away and not to drag you off the stage if you go past your time, but please be cognizant of our time so that we do have time for as many questions as possible. Candidates have been emailed a list of topics, and some of the questions that I knew ahead of time, I did ask for questions that came in through email and through our Facebook page. And then I will have the microphone that I will hand around, and you can ask questions as well. So they won't be prepared for those, but they'll be prepared for everything else. Candidates, thank you so much for coming this evening. I'd like to introduce our 2 candidates for the City of Redmond Mayor position. We have Angela Burney and Steve Fields. And we're going to go ahead and start with their opening statements, and we will start with Angela Burney. And go ahead and speak right into the microphone.
Right into it, okay.
You can take it out of the stand if you'd like.
Thank you. How's that? Closer? Good. Okay. Here in the back? Great. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. As Paige said, I know that there are other choices to watch, exciting football, and there's a women's soccer game on, and who knows, baseball, I think. But thank you all for coming out tonight. I just want to share a little bit about myself and why I'm running for this job. When my family came to Redmond, I used my background as a middle school science teacher to volunteer at my daughter's schools. I enjoyed using my skills and talents to help students throughout our community. As my daughters grew, I turned to volunteering with Lake Washington Schools Foundation, Lake Washington School District, and Redmond's Parks and Trails Commission, among other things. These first experiences inspired me. It matched my skills with community needs, and it sparked a passion in me to make the city a better place for all. I ran for city council in 2015, offering a voice as a mom, educator, and community volunteer that was missing. My science background and community experience has truly found a home while working with the dedicated staff and people of our city. I've used my time on council and as council president to make good long-term decisions for Redmond and our region. First and foremost, I've made our meetings more open and transparent, which was a priority for me. Our community and our democracy prospers when everyone has access. I also spearheaded the development of a strategic plan for our city with input from council and staff. Moving forward, I will continue to represent all in our community. During my 20-plus years of volunteering within the region and working with the City of Redmond, neighboring cities, past and present leaders, and many regional groups, I've learned so much. And one of the most important things I learned, governing Redmond goes far beyond our city limits, and having relationships locally and regionally is essential to affect change. I've fostered these relationships, and I will call upon them to ensure that Redmond continues to be a leader in innovation, planning, transportation, the regional economy, and a high quality of life. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve Fields, a candidate for mayor of Redmond. So this is where I'm supposed to talk about my vision, my qualifications, my priorities. And we've had a lot of candidate forums during this election cycle. And we have websites. People write about us on the Redmond Reporter, and they write about us in the Seattle Times, and you all talk about us. So I think that we've explained a lot about what our visions are, what our priorities are. And in fact, if you go to anyone's website, you're going to find, in general, a council candidate, a mayor candidate, from Redmond, from Bellevue. You're going to find the same issues: affordability, transportation, how do we manage growth? But what you really want to know, what you're really interested in, is can you trust us to keep those promises? I went back 4 years and saw basically the same issues in candidates' websites and their material as I see today. So the question is, can you trust us to keep our promises, and do we have the skills to keep our promises? So you're trying to discern that and make a decision. If it's an incumbent, you have some opportunity to compare what they said to what they did. If it's a new candidate, which we have many of, and I'm excited to see that, then you have to discern a little harder. What I'm going to try to do tonight in the questions that I'm asked is give you a reason to believe that I am what I say. I put people first, and what that means is every decision I make and every policy I advocate for, the guiding principle is, how does that affect people? What will that mean to the quality of their lives? What will that mean to the risks in their lives? How can we enhance optimism? How can we create that hope that they can live their life to its fullest potential? The other thing is that I have the skills. I've got 30 years experience. I talk about it ad nauseum. I'm sure that if you went to my website, you'll see it emphasized right up front. That skill in a CEO position is important because I've proven and demonstrated not only to the people around me, but to myself that I can do this job and I can do it well. And the third thing that I want to emphasize is I'm independent. And that means that my priority is to make people's lives better who live here. I'm not tied to a political agenda or handed one because of endorsements. I don't have a lot of financial support from developers. My purpose is to lead the city to a better place and lead people's lives to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our first question was proposed by email and is from John W. And we'll start with Mr. Fields on the response for this one. What are the top 2 or 3 problems that Redmond's rapid overgrowth has caused, and what do you propose to do to resolve them?
Well, we have grown rapidly, and we've also not been careful about how we did it. We weren't careful on a transportation system, and we're suffering from that. I think that if I had to pick something that our growth has impacted us, it's our ability to get around. We've been literally trapped in our cars at certain times of the day, and I believe unnecessarily. I think if we would have thought this through and we would have built better infrastructure and been more bold in creating that smart city technology and some of the alternatives that other cities are doing, if we would have done that when we planned this growth, I think we would have mitigated a lot of the heartache. And we also need a transportation plan today, now, in order to make sure that when light rail gets here, we're prepared for it and we have an equitable system of transportation where everyone can access this regional advantage that we're going to get. The other is, and the best way for me to describe this, I met with someone from our Indian community. I helped them in a Ganesh celebration. And we were talking about, from his perspective, what Redmond needs. And he said this. He said, build me a city that I can love. And that means we need to pay attention, again, to how people's reactions are. Do they really feel safe walking, biking? Are we really have that vitality? We say we do. But when I drive in downtown Redmond, I don't see it, not like I do in other cities. So the question is, the character of our city, the pride in our city, sort of gave way to the rapid growth of apartment homes for our major employer. And we could have done better.
Thank you. Angela?
So first of all, I think that we are actually a very fortunate area in that we have a very thriving economy. I grew up in an area in Eastern Washington that had boom and bust cycles, and those were really traumatic for everyone who lived there and the families and residences, and you never knew when the next cycle would come where things might get better, or you never knew the next cycle where things might get worse. So currently we're in this great rapid growth with this great economy that we have that we're really fortunate to have, and we do have some challenges with that. I wouldn't say it's overgrowth. We actually have very extensive transportation plans. We have extensive planning for everything you can imagine in a city. It's required by the state, and we have all of those things. But one of the things I see as one of the biggest challenges is because of the growth that we have and because of the high cost of living here, we are creating a place where it's really unaffordable for a lot of families to live and stay. We have businesses that have a hard time hiring people because they can't hire the workers they need because the workers don't want to commute for 2 hours to get here. We have families who have been living in their homes for maybe over 40 years, and they have their houses paid off, but their tax bill keeps going up, and it's making it really a huge challenge for them to stay in this area. So we have a lot of those challenges related to high cost of living and affordability. And those are some areas that we're already doing a lot of work in, and I will continue to do that, but to make sure I look out for not just families that are coming new to Redmond, but also families that have been here for a long time. Another one of the challenges that we have with all of this is that we are in the process of building 4 light rail stations that are coming to Redmond, which is fantastic. But we have to wait a few years for those to get here. And so meanwhile, we're trying to adapt to the challenges that we have with the density that we have. But we are doing a lot of things differently than we had, say, 20 years ago. We have changed the street grid so that there's different ways to get through town. We have improved our bike paths and bike trails to make sure that people can use an alternative source or walk to work. We do have a long-term plan to finish the East Side Rail Corridor that will connect us to Kirkland. So there are some things that we are doing.
Thank you. We have time for an audience question. Who'd like to go first?
I would like to ask about the green scooter program and why the city didn't do better due diligence to stop some of the problems that are going on with it, such as speeding on sidewalks, multiple people on a scooter, no helmets. They don't discriminate on who can get on for age-wise, and they're very dangerous, and something's going to happen soon if we don't do a better job of monitoring them and putting some regulations into place. And I'd like to hear what each of you think about that.
Angela, you're first.
Thank you. So we're in a trial period for the Lime scooters. They showed up, we passed an ordinance that allowed them, and also bike sharing as well, but Lime scooters was the only company that decided to come forward and try this out. There is a large campaign to help people understand the safety that they need to have when they use them, not use them on sidewalks, use them in bike lanes. They're supposed to wear helmets. There's an agreement that people do when they use their phone to sign up to use them. They have to accept the terms of the use. And so, that's on the rider. Part of the challenge I see with people not following those instructions, as you pointed out, is that it's causing hazard for other people as well. Lime, the company, has been getting notified when there are challenges, and that's all going into our information of whether or not we decide to keep this program or not. Some people love them. Some people hate them. It's really interesting to see the dynamic of that. But we are monitoring it. There are regulations in place. One thing I will say is that I think it's really important for all of us to remember that, I see it with a lot of things in our city, and I hear a lot of comments at the door about it. It's really important to remember that we're part of this community, and it's our job to make sure that what we do is being a good citizen is important as well. Making sure we take care of the people around us. And so I think it would be important to really reiterate that in our whole city, to remember that if you're using one of these, to remember to look out for other people, just like a lot of other things as well. But it is getting observed. All of that information is getting recorded, and we do have contact with Lyme about what they should be doing better. But it is a work in progress. That's why it's just a trial period.
Thank you. Steve?
So I am an advocate of alternative forms of transportation. Scooters are successfully deployed in many cities around the world. As Bernie said, this is a pilot program, and we will get lessons learned. Now, that being said, that I'm an advocate and that this is a pilot program, when we were going about to approve this, one of the things that I asked for fairly consistently and tried to stress is that we need to have some measurements and some goals and what types of lessons we actually want to learn going into this program. I think I don't think that we should put a program in and then not be prepared to make adjustments, even if it's a pilot program. So I think that what we're seeing, the lack of safety, the lack of courtesy, and the difficulty for people whose mode of transportation is wheelchair, we're making a mess. And it's not like we went into this with no information. As I've said, this is historically something that the entire planet is using. I was in Barcelona, Spain, and I discovered something I think is really important, and I want to bring it up when we do, in fact, deliberate about the success or lack of success. It's only available to the people who live in Barcelona. As a tourist or a visitor, you can't get access to the scooters or the Lime bikes. And what that does is creates a level of user accountability. So they try to target for its purpose. The reason we said that we want it, it's not for kids to race around at night. It's to enhance our transportation system. So we need to build the scooter program around people who need it or use it for an alternative for their cars. Thanks. Why does my time go so fast?
Another audience question? Here.
I took a few notes, if you don't mind, because I have had some really bad experiences with them. First of all, when any of the scooters, Bird or any of them, first came to the front, they didn't ask the cities for permission. They just dumped them on the corners and in people's yards. They're banned in Paris, Beverly Hills, Fort Lauderdale, and Lisbon. And cities are left to deal with the impact. The carelessness of what they're doing, littering the sidewalks, stuffed into city garbage cans, on lawns, blocking driveways, fire hydrants, accessibility for wheelchairs, of which a couple of my friends are wheelchairs and sight impaired. People are sick of them and have taken to scooter vandalism, and other impacts are increasing. Injuries and deaths, and they showed some pictures of head injuries, people flipping off of them right in front of cars. And there was a gal that said that most of the malfunctions of the scooters come mid-ride because these scooters were not intended for commercial capacity.
So I'll give you each 2 minutes to respond to that if you would like. And we'll start with Mr. Fields.
Well, and I think that goes to the point that I was making. We had plenty of information from other cities who were ahead of us on this, and I appreciate what you're saying, but you have to get to where the problem begins, and it is in fact in how you set it up and how you promote it and who you promote it for. Scooters in some cities, and I mentioned Barcelona, they went through exactly what you said, and they found a way to make it work. They had a huge outcry and they named all of the things that you said. They're unsafe. They create hazards. It's just rude in general to leave them everywhere, and people were fighting back. And as you put it, destruction of the Lime property, throwing them in the rivers or throwing them out in the fields or whatever they were doing. But they found a way, and I happened to witness it, that it works. So I think it is, the scooters are not inherently evil. They don't really have a sense of being rude. It's the people, and it's the city's responsibility to create an infrastructure and create those rules. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. I think the city is, in fact, trying to be responsible. But I think that we could have done better and been a little better prepared, to your point. So I'm not sure I can add a whole lot to that.
Angela?
I think that you should come to council with your concerns or send an email, since this is a forum more about candidates, not about right here and now. But I understand your concerns about the Lime scooters. So far in the city, I've not heard of any major incidents that have happened. But we are collecting data. We are making sure what we do into the future is better for all. The staff did extensive research on how to have this start up in our city. And as I mentioned, we've been working on this for a couple of years now. We put a pause on it last year when we first were going through the process, because we just didn't feel like we had enough information. There were some other challenges happening. And so when we opened up the permit this year for Lime to come in, they do have strict regulations about what they should and shouldn't do. I agree with Mr. Fields. There's still a lot of information to gather, and I think that if we decide as a city that we want to continue this program, that we'll have to find some better ways to do some things to make sure people feel safe, whether they're using them or not. It is one of the challenges of a city when you bring in new technology to try to figure out what is the best way for the people in the city to either use it or be around it. And this is just one of those incidences where, you know, it's a new thing for our city and a new thing for the region. And I hope that we find a path forward to be able to use some kind of alternative modes of transportation that aren't single vehicles or Lime or Uber or things like that. I think this is an interesting alternative, and we'll see how it progresses and what our residents think, what people who live here think about, should we keep it or should we not.
Thank you. This is a question that was posed through the Next Door site. There has been a lot of discussion on the downtown park, its cost and value to the residents of Redmond. Do you believe the money spent on the park was a good value for the residents of Redmond? And if a vote were held today, would you vote for or against spending $42 million on the downtown park? And we're going to start with Angela on this one.
Yes, there has been a bit of discussion about this. So I was on the Parks and Trails Commission when we started the planning of the park. The land, the major planning of having a park there and the purchase of that land had already happened. It also included completing the street grid through there and eventually the conversion of the one-way streets to two-way and a lot of other improvements through the making Bear Creek an alternative route. So I would vote for the park, absolutely. It is a destination place for our downtown. It is a park that everyone in our city and outside of our city can use. It was wonderful to see it activated this summer with many activities, people hanging out, major celebrations. Even in the nasty weather, I would see people on the stage having a great time. In a city of our growing size, it's important to have large spaces like that for people to come together and meet and have community celebrations and do other community activities. That land, because it's zoned downtown, had we not purchased it as a city, it would have become another, most likely, 5/1 building with retail on the ground floor and residential above, and we would not have that wonderful space for everyone to enjoy. Half of the money went to purchasing the land and relocating businesses, and the other half went to the park. And it's really important to remember that if you're going to build a significant park that will last a long time, you have to devote a decent amount of money to. Houses around this area, new houses go for over $2 million, and this is a park that costs $21 million. So, yeah, I think it's a wonderful, beautiful place. It is great for our city, and I think that investments like that are really important to keep in mind for the big picture of what our city is.
Thank you. Steve?
There are so many levels and aspects to this question, and we've been asked it a couple of times during these candidate forums. So first off, I think $43 million for what we got is not a good value at all. 4 years ago, when this came up during my candidacy for mayor, I spoke out against it because I didn't think that, and I happened to have some insight from people who were on this committee and actually resigned from the committee because they didn't feel like they were being listened to or they were being heard, and that the city was determined to go down a path rather than explore alternatives. So the fact that we have so many people, this is a park. I mean, think about it. This is a park. There should not be any division about a park. We have a number of our residents here who say, what a waste of money. How did that happen? And what Ms. Burney and others will want you to believe is that the city was very involved, the residents were very involved in this. And if they were, then why are they so surprised? What I would rather have seen is a more thoughtful use of $42 million. And that would have been a series of public spaces, more green than cement. I mean, we have the facts and the data on climate warming. So why did we not emphasize green, even as an example? So more public space in the downtown corridor that actually connects and meets the goals of creating that community feel where people don't feel divided. That park is problematic because it sits right in the middle of a thoroughfare and there's traffic going through every day. Those events could be held anywhere. And we did, in fact, have to start closing the streets in order to have those events. So I'm not saying we didn't need a downtown park. We absolutely did. But we could have planned it and done it much better and much cheaper.
Thank you. Audience question? The question has been posed again. Would you have voted for it? If a vote were held today, would you vote for or against spending $42 million on the downtown park?
I would
Steve?
vote no. I would vote no.
Thank you. Audience questions?
I have a question that goes back. Can you hear me? Okay. A question that goes back to the use of motorized vehicles. I thought that originally the trails, I live very close to the Sammamish River Trail, just to the north of downtown where the city hall is, and I thought that was for walkers and bikers, and now I'm seeing electric bicycles and the scooters, as well as sometimes, I don't know what they're called, they have two wheels and a person balances on it in the middle. I've seen those that are electrified as well, and it just seems like there's more and more electrified things on the trail, and I want to know each of your positions on how that trail is supposed to be used or how you would envision it being used in a safe way. So my question's not about the Lime bikes, it's about electrification of vehicles or things on that trail. And
Steve, we start with you. Was the question clear?
Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
Thank you.
It is. For me, it's not about electrification. I don't think that it's about speed. It's about infrastructure and basic courtesy and acceptance of the city rules. And what I mean by that is, a non-electric bike going 35 miles an hour can really hurt somebody in the same way that an electric bike could. The problem with the electric bike is they're a little bit harder to stop at high speeds. But we have rules around speed, and we have rules around sharing our trails. Where I think what the city needs to consider is that as we grow and as these trails become more popular, the old thinking of putting pedestrians and electric vehicles and other modes of transportation in that same area or that same trail, we need to start thinking in terms of expanding those trails so that they do in fact separate people walking from people riding. And that would be the direction that I would take it. Now, yes, that's a big investment, but I think we have to start thinking about it, and I think that safety is important. And I think, again, multimodal forms of transportation are important. We don't want to discourage people from walking because they don't feel safe. So I don't think it's about electric. I think it's about infrastructure and a system and finding ways to share the trail, so to speak. Thanks.
Angela?
Thank you. So a few things. There are speed limits on the trails. We went through an extensive revisit to all of our park and trail rules recently and capped it at speed limits. But of course, that requires us to monitor that. So I totally get that. One of the challenges we also face is the Sammamish River Trail is actually not the city of Redmond's trail, it's King County. And so King County has jurisdiction on it. So we can refer challenges to King County, and it's up to them to monitor that and to deal with some of the issues that happen on there. I do agree that courtesy and shared use of the trail is really important. That trail, especially on a lovely Saturday, is used by so many different people, families, walkers, small bikes, big bikes, fast bikes, electric bikes. And it is overprescribed at times. It is really quite crowded. We are completing the last piece of the Redmond Central Connector, which will connect to Kirkland, and that'll alleviate some of the challenges that we have on that trail. It'll bring up another opportunity for people to use a trail near that area and get to Kirkland rather than the Sammamish River Trail. We also have some other trail completions that will happen near where the Marymore Village Light Rail Station is going in to help connect that piece of it and add another trail extension for people to be able to use that. So the more trail systems that we can add and complete, the more diversity we can have. People that can use all these different modes of transportation to get around. But I do absolutely hear you that there are parts of trails when people are going extremely fast, when people are going near them very slow, that it is really a challenge for everybody involved. And I think that just goes back to my desire for people to have a little bit of common courtesy and awareness of people around them and remember that they're part of this community and it's important for them to do their part to be a good member of our community and to really look out for other people.
Thank you. This is a question posed by email. What can be done to improve access to the transit centers from Education Hill and other residential neighborhoods that are not downtown? And we'll start with Angela. It's a long question, and the background is that there are very few metro stops available up on Education Hill, for instance.
Oh, okay.
And the traffic coming down Education Hill to get to the transit center is usually very difficult.
Gotcha. Okay. So the question is about not just transit center access, like when people want to drive down a park at the Park and Ride and it's overfull, but also the access to, say, the bus out here.
How
and
to
you want
get
to take
there.
it.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a known problem. The 220, let's just take the 221 in particular that goes behind us up Education Hill and around. That bus happens on a good day every half an hour, and it gets backed up in traffic and has challenges. I see so many people taking that bus. And if we had that bus with more frequency, so many more people would take that bus because it connects to the Redmond Transit Center and gives you an opportunity to take all kinds of other routes. Metro's system is you have to have the demand first before we'll add more routes. And my thought is if you added more frequency of that bus, you would have more demand because it would be more reliable and people could take that as an alternative. So that's one of the areas that I think, not just on Education Hill, but the other areas of our city as well. They have similar issues going on where it's important for us to think as a city, do we want to invest in more transit in our area, in our city as a city? Is that an investment we want to make? And also we need to work with Metro and encourage them to change their tactics, change their method for how they prescribe routes in our system. If we really want to get people off the road, if we really want to get people into downtown when the stations do open up, then we have to invest in those systems to help people not have to take their own car down there. So that is one of the big areas that I am extremely encouraged and extremely focused on making it better into the future.
Steve?
We touched on this a little bit earlier, and the whole idea of having a full and complete transportation system, and this is a big part of it. We know that light rail's coming. We've known it for some time, and we should be preparing for it. And there's a lot of things we can do. And technology is going to be our friend. Technology will help in a very big way because it's going to give us data and information, and it will enable that porch to destination, one-stop shopping. And that is already emerging, and I think the city should invest in it, and I think the city should promote it and facilitate it for the residents. The idea of Metro and meeting Metro's needs, we need to start thinking in terms of where we build. And some of those areas that feel remote, we need to plan. When we plan our city, we need to think in terms of transportation and where we can optimize the location of multifamily homes. And we talked about this a little bit in the last candidate forum. I am one of those people who think we need to have that discussion about our single-family zoning. I think that we need to have some light density in some of these areas and take people off the road by providing services in these neighborhoods. We need to be very careful, very selective. We don't want to change the quality of people's lives, but I think we can enhance the quality of people's lives. In addition to local access and getting Metro's needs met, we can talk to our employers about shuttles. We can create that infrastructure that actually gives people that opportunity to be Uber, light rail, or bike, light rail, or all of those combinations of things that go together to say, I go from here to there.
Thank you. All right, this is a Facebook question from Susan D. The current leadership in Redmond seems to care more for the downtown apartment dwellers than the longtime residents. For example, the downtown park. Yes, we're back at the downtown park. There are many undeveloped park-owned lands in the outskirts of Redmond that have yet to be developed, such as Conrad Olson Farm. What would you do to change the imbalance? And we'll start with Steve on this one.
Well, I think I would change the imbalance. I mean, it's a mindset. I agree with the person who gave that question. I think the city electeds have been very much in lockstep over creating urban centers. And this was something I've talked about extensively in previous campaigns. We need to balance our look, and we need to balance the needs of all of our residents. We can do two things at the same time. We can enhance the quality of life in our neighborhoods as we build an urban center. And I think that all comes from the planning that I've talked about. Building, I hear often from my opponent and from some of the other council members that we are protecting the neighborhoods and building everything in downtown urban centers. Just the premise of that actually disturbs me because it feels like a them versus us mentality. And that's not what we want in the city. We want to create that evenness. We want to create that balance and show the entire city that what we're doing is thoughtful and comprehensive and complete. Now, how that looks, I think that's yet to be done. The question implies perspective and attitude. The question implies an indifference to the neighborhoods. And I'm sure you're going to hear in a few seconds that that's just not true. I actually believe that it was true. And how that looks is yet to be determined, but we need to begin with an honest assessment of our own attitudes and perspective. We need to say, at least do that self-reflection and say, if people are thinking this, if people are saying this, maybe we should look at the decisions and the decision-making process.
Thank you. Angela?
Thank you. A few years ago, we went through an extensive park plan, and what that did was invited the community to come to the city and participate. Actually, the city went out to many different areas in the community and participate in what do you see as our parks and trails? What are our needs? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see investments? And from that park plan is where we, as a city, and our Parks and Trails commissioners and everyone else who's involved, focus on what the people of the city said they want to invest in, where they want to invest. And so we have a priority list of areas that we are making investments as a city, and that's how we do planning. We get input from the community. We take a look at their budgets and what we can and can't do, and then we look for equitable distribution throughout the city. So one of the big projects that we have right now is the West Side Park is going through a big rehab because it needs it. It's been a while. It has some issues. It gets a lot of use, and that has been on the park plan, and that's one of the investments that we're making. We're also making an investment in the Smith Woods Park, which is in North Redmond, a beautiful piece of land that it's it's going to be a nature park. It's not going to be a big ball field or something like that, but it needed some improvements to that for a pond that it has there. So we do make investments throughout our city on different parks and in different ways. I will say that it's also important to make sure that new areas of our city have these parklands as well. We have investments coming into the Overlake area as well as development happens there. Downtown Park is a big investment. Conrad Olson is one of the parks that we have, but it's also out in unincorporated King County, part of Redmond, but King County, very strange, like half of Para goes in King County and half is in Redmond. And we know we have those lands and we know there are things we could do with it, but our community has said that doesn't rise to the priority list of some of these other parks.
Thank you. Questions from the audience?
There's a lot of talk about involving the community. I'm born and raised in the area, homeowner, 35 years here. I've never had anyone come out. I don't know how the government works to get the community involved and get opinions. Can you share that and what you're going to do to get more community engagement and what the current percentage of engagement is versus the population? Because I'd like to see more community involvement.
I think that's a really good question. I was asked this question recently, the same kind of thing. And, you know, one of the interesting facets of our community is that everyone gets information differently. You know, how I might get information is different from you. Some people look at Facebook, some people look at Twitter, some people read the Redmond Reporter, some people watch TV, and so it's hard to find the right path. And so my plan for the future is to continue to invest in a holistic communication plan for the city to make sure that we are doing many different ways, having many different avenues to get input and to receive input from the community members and to get information out into the community. We have taken our council meetings on the road 2 or 3 times a year. We go out to different parts of the community and people come in and get to ask us questions somewhat like this. And so we started doing that, but that is only a small fragment of the population that can attend things like that. So we've been trying to think of different ways that we can do things like that. The park plan that I mentioned earlier, it went out into probably 20 different neighborhoods and had different neighborhood meetings trying to get input from different residents. So there's a lot of small things that we can do, but one of the things that I think is really important is if you feel like the city has not been able to contact with, like you haven't felt involved, I think it's important for you to share that information with the city and suggest ways of how you get information and ways you think that we could do a better job with that, because that's how a city gets better, is they get input from the community saying, you know, I appreciate you trying to do this, but you're really not reaching me, and here's a good way that you could reach me. And so I think that's a really great avenue. The other thing I will say is, being on the campaign trail, I'm going to people's doors and I'm knocking on them and I'm talking to people, and I get to hear different stories from different people all throughout our city. Every neighborhood has its own story, and it's really important for me to hear what is really important to you, just like you coming tonight and asking that question. So I think there's always improvement we can do, but my goal is to have a holistic plan for the entire city to really get out there more than we have been.
So when we're elected to office, the burden is on us to be an elected representative. And what that means to me is that if I'm not doing that, if I'm not making those connections, I'm not doing my job. What I do on city council, we have this thing called ombuds, and we get an email. If it's something that I think I can help with, I actually call that person or I go visit that person. Recently, there was a lady who said, that she's seen more rats in grass lawn. And I went out and have talked with her, and I tried to understand why she believes that, and I brought it back to the council. What I would do as mayor is be with people. That would be a big part of my job. Yes, there's the managing the city, making decisions, doing budgets, doing strategic plans. All of that stuff is important. But a big part of this job is to listen to people. And the best way to do that is to go out to their events. We have these city events. We invite people to our city events. What we don't do very proactively, something that I've done recently, is gone out to our communities, especially our diverse communities of color. I've gone out and listened to them and said, how can we do better? What is it that you need help with, or what do you fear? How can we empower you to be stronger and more bolder in the community? So, yes, we can put a holistic system together, and we're doing that. There is technology, and there's systems, and there's ways of doing surveys. All of those things exist. But until you put heart into it, until you gain that trust, people don't want to waste their time. And that's part of the problem in the city. People have actually got involved, and then they got shut down because it didn't fit with the narrative. So their ideas were not accepted, and they were diminished. So heart is where this begins.
My question is about safety, and in particular property safety. We moved over here in 2011, and we chose Redmond over Bellevue and Seattle because we felt comfortable and safe over here. We've owned for quite a few years now, and we've noticed a lot of what started with mail theft, then it moved into packages theft, and then burglaries as well. I don't know if our knowledge of it is because social media is growing and we hear more about it, but I don't know, my feeling or our feeling is that it is increasing. So my question is, what would you guys do, each of you specifically, to proactively get involved with that public safety? I know that this is police job, but how is city controlling this? Like, what I'm trying to say is, for instance, 5 minutes walk from our house, a week ago, car was stolen. We live right by Microsoft, very safe area, supposedly safe area. Their car was stolen from in front of their house. We had to install locking mailboxes, not even the single locking mailboxes, but the cluster mailboxes. I organized it for our neighborhood because our mail was just basically found. Bellevue police came to our house. They found our mail somewhere in Bellevue of our debit cards. So the question is, yes, there are cases that are given to police, there's case number, but everyone is sort of laughing at it that this small-time crooks are not being found, basically, and nothing is being done with the thefts, the mail theft or car theft. What can be done to more proactively deal with the situation?
Steve.
That's a spectacular question, not a good question, a spectacular question. I think about this all the time. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and we get the reports consistently how Redmond is doing better than anywhere in the state, and with respect to low crime. And I'm one of those people who've lived in Redmond since 1990. Actually started working here in 1978, and for years I didn't lock my car. We don't always lock our doors because that's how we felt in Redmond. I've heard more and more of these incidences. As a matter of fact, I was out on Avondale and meeting a resident out there, and we came across a whole stack of mail. And we picked it up and we put it back into the post office. Hopefully it got to the people. But I think what you're saying is really important. We need to start changing how we think about this, because you're right, it's the broken window concept. If you allow a broken window, that emboldens somebody to then go through that window. And then once they go through that window, they're going to go into the rest of your house. So I think that we need to start thinking from anecdotes, and this is something I've been thinking about recently. mostly because we're so proud of ourselves about our low crime, which is great, but we're more, seems like we're more intent on protecting our image rather than protecting our future. So as we grow and as different kinds of people come here, some with bad intent, I think we need to be prepared. And I think we need to start collecting that type of data and create the modeling for, one, how we can deal with it and combat it, and two, how can we prevent, what kinds of law enforcement and community activism and community exchanges that we can use to keep it in check. So I love that question.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. We do live in an extremely safe city. We do have property crime. That is our number one challenge, I would say, facing our city as far as safety goes. I'm glad you installed locking mailboxes, which is unfortunate, but it does seem to be the age that we're in. It's important to have your mail be able to be locked up. Our police officers, our police department works really hard on property crime. They do actually take, it's unlike a large city across the lake from us. They do actually follow up on people who have experienced property crime or car theft or break-ins or whatever it might be. They file police reports, they follow up. They also work extensively regionally to see if there are crime rings happening. And many of the big incidents where we've had multiple kind of thefts in our area, the police have followed up with other regional police forces and the sheriff and have found the criminals and caught them and put them to, put them on trial. So we do have a very dedicated police force that works on this. So if you experience any of this, it's important that you actually call them and report it. You might not get your answer immediately, but they do work on all these things all the time. I will still continue to invest in our public safety, in our fire department, and making sure that they have what they need to do their jobs. I think they're going to need some more innovative approaches to what they're doing into the future as more people move to Redmond, as we have transit, light rail coming here. We have bike police that are really awesome. If you haven't seen them around, to take a look for them when the weather's nice in downtown. And I think it'll be important to add more of those units throughout our city. So there are a lot of things that we can do, but I really want to assure you that we do actually live in a very safe city. And when we do have crime happen, our police force is on top of it and making sure that they solve it and work with other jurisdictions to make sure they solve things regionally as well.
Thank you. What advantages will your time on Redmond City Council provide to you as mayor? Angela?
My time. So I'm about 4 years on council now, and I was on the Parks and Trails Commission prior to that. So when I was on Parks and Trails Commission, it helped me understand how the city itself works. Every organization has its different method of working. So it helped me then. Then since being on council, I have a very good handle on how our budget process works, having been through that a few times now. I fully understand how all the different departments work and integrate with each other and don't integrate with each other, and maybe should a little more. I also fully understand the process of passing policy within our city and understanding some of the long-range projects we have going on. I have a really good understanding of all the planning that we do. We have a comprehensive plan coming up in a couple of years that I think will be really important for all of us to be, all of you to be involved in as well. I also have a good understanding of how the boards and commissions do their job as volunteers with our city to bring in to bring the public's opinions into a lot of different programs we have. I found my time on council has been really informative. The first few months or so I was very quiet because I'm a learner and I wanted to make sure I totally was trying to understand how the system works. And then after that, I've been a voice of the community, making sure I speak up when it's important, making sure I add my voice to the process to make sure the process works better and make sure that the policies we end up with are better representative of our whole community. And so I feel really privileged that I've been able to be in this role. This was not my intent when I set out in life, when I graduated from college with my biology ed degree. That was not my goal, but I feel like the things I've learned, the working with the community and all the different aspects that I've had, and the opportunity to work on council on policy and regionally has been extremely influential, and I think that I will do an excellent job of making sure I continue to represent all of you and everyone else in this city in Redmond.
Thank you. Steve?
Would you mind just reading that question again?
Sure. What advantages will your time on Redmond City Council provide to you as mayor?
So what I brought to Redmond City Council was 12 years experience in government administration. So I was at the staff level. I saw how the county and all of the different departments worked, and I was not, I advised electeds. I advised them on policy across the whole range of issues, including business continuity or emergency preparation, budgeting, how do we budget capital, how we improve our performance management, and how we improve our efficiency. So I brought those skills and deep understanding of how government works to the city council. And so my tendency or my approach was to try to understand the city and understand it comparative to what I knew from King County and City of Seattle. And so my questions were always about how do we improve our operations? How do we make better services for our residents? And how do we bring the ideas and the policies of people on staff and in the elected office to fruition? How does that happen, and how do we complete that? So I sort of see this as an additional learning experience from that 12 years experience in the county, plus all of the finance management I did prior to that. And this confirms a lot of the things that I knew. I was able to work with staff and learn about our city operations, and I think I can combine that experience into a great mayor.
Thank you. That segues to our next question, which came from email. What is your experience with managing staff, hiring staff, and budget responsibility? And we start with Steve on this one.
Do we get like 4 minutes on this one?
Let's do 3 minutes on this one. Yeah, we'll do 3 minutes on this one.
Wait, you got to start over. I see that clock ticking. Okay. Thank you. I've been really fortunate in my career. I had a lot of opportunity, and I recognize that, in fact, as a white male, that I had that opportunity, and I recognized it early. So a big part of my experience was bringing everybody into that teamwork and into that decision-making role, into the extent that I tried to elevate every single person that I worked with, who worked for me, and who I worked for. So I began in aerospace, and I negotiated very large contracts for 2 different companies, and I had a staff of 13 people in one of those places and a staff of 8 in the other. And I was responsible for the hiring and firing and team building and making sure that we met our mission. From there, I consulted with businesses who were doing business with the U.S. government or state and local governments. And they were mostly technology firms, and I led a lot of big projects, including one at Boeing that had a team of about 200 analysts working with the government on a $700 million overrun on a Navy project. So I had a chance to really hone my leadership skills and inspire people. And what I realized in doing that is that you have to really prevent certain decision-making processes from happening. You have to make sure that everybody feels empowered. You have to make sure that everyone understands what their responsibilities are. And most important, the thing that I find the most inspiring is accountability. My whole focus was around results and getting people to achieve those results. I took those skills to the county, and I had, again, great opportunity to work with every single department there. And a lot of times I would take field trips to learn more closely what that meant. I would go out on boats to inspect water quality on our lakes. I visited every single park in the time that I was there to understand the maintenance. In roads, I went out with the roads crews to see, what are their challenges and what can they do and what technology do they need and what support from leadership. So I had a great, great career and a great experience. And it's a passion for me to create those teams and inspire people to do their best And that's what I would bring to the city of Redmond, and I'm excited to be able to do that in the very near future.
Angela?
Trying to figure out in what direction to take this question. So first of all, I think it's an interesting question. The organization of the city of Redmond, the mayor's job is to have the vision for the city and to direct the city in where it's going. We also have a person called Maxine Wadham currently, who's our COO, and she does all the day-to-day operations. I have experience working with the city's budget already for the time I have been on council and prior to that. I fully understand how it works, where the money goes, what happens with it, and how it's important to use our budgeting by priorities process. I had the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom for 21 years, which was a fantastic opportunity. And with that, I gave up the opportunity to continue in my career and perhaps do something else with my life. And I think that it's interesting to say that the job of mayor requires someone to have, say, business experience to do that. I think that's incorrect. I think the job of the mayor is to be the leader of the city and what that looks like. I have done extensive training with Leadership Eastside, which is an opportunity to learn about how to lead better, how to bring people together, and how to find good decisions in the long run. I've also participated in Executive Insight in the same program. Highly recommend it for those of you who are interested in it. But I think being a leader of the city of Redmond takes a different set of skills. One of my personal political heroes is Patty Murray. Patty Murray was a mom who wore tennis shoes. They used to make fun of her, but she was PTA president, and she is now one of the top women in government. And it didn't take a traditional way for her to get there. It took hard work. It took heart for her community. It took thoughtful planning. It took a vision for what she could see her community could be. And that's what I bring to this job as well. I have learned so much being on council and being part of this. I do work regionally. I am looked as a leader in the region as well. And I don't think I'm disqualified from this job because I don't have that traditional business background that people for some reason think that you have to have. I think actually at this stage of Redmond, it's important to have something a little bit different. We've had a leader in office for 12 years who has had that background, and it's been great. But I also think it's time for something a little bit different and something who sees the community as a whole, and it's important for people to understand that all of us belong here, all of us are welcome here, and all of us have to do our part to make Redmond an even better city than it is.
Thank you. Audience questions?
I just wonder, what's your current plan to deal with the homeless issues in Redmond?
So I'll repeat the question. What is your plan to deal with your current plan to deal with the homeless situation in Redmond?
I will continue with the really impressive programs that we have right now. We have a gentleman named Kent Hay that does our homelessness coordination. We've also received a grant from the state to bring in a mental health counselor to work with him. We do a lot of work regionally as well. In 2015, the city of Redmond convened a homelessness group, or people to come in and talk about what the challenge of having homelessness in Redmond. And from that, we came up with a list of priorities, and we are implementing those. We have extended the young adult shelter to 21 beds. We also have a day shelter for them to be able to take care of themselves during the day. We also continue with our coordination with Bellevue and Kirkland to provide homeless shelters throughout our region. We also have Kent, like I mentioned. We have a lot of other programmings that help people throughout our community. The other thing I will say is that I'm on the Regional Policy Committee, and one of our tasks right now is to figure out how the Seattle-King County interlocal agreement will work with homelessness coordination. And that's been a really interesting process to see how do we as Sound Cities, or all of the cities outside of Seattle as a region, help Seattle and King County manage their homelessness issues better. As many of you know, Seattle has been very challenged with what's going on in their city. It is a large city. They have a large homeless population, and things probably haven't gone as well as they were hoping. And so King County and Seattle are trying to work together to improve all of that system. But it's up to us as the city of Redmond. We actually have programs that are working. Kent has a pretty decent success rate with helping people get housed. And I think it's important for us as a city to share that knowledge with the rest of the county and say there are programs that work, and it might be important for you to take a look at what's going on outside of Seattle to implement some of those programs. So my goal with our homelessness population is to help people find homes and to help people not feel, as Kent says, not feel comfortable in their homelessness where they are. So encourage people to get into the programs that we have, work with them to find them shelter, find them homes, find them permanent housing, and help them to have more productive lives. So that is my goal as being mayor as well.
Steve?
I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. We need to be a learning organization. We need to always, you can call it glass half full, half empty, but I think that when we, as I listened to Councilmember Bernie, my concern rose because yes, Kent Hay is doing a marvelous job, and I've actually rode out with him a couple of times. I've been to the community court, and I was at the King County when Ron Sims said we have a 10-year program to end homelessness. But these are very fluid problems, and we need to always be challenging what comes next. So yeah, Kent is marvelous under the capacity that he has, but I've asked him specifically, what happens if this goes up? What happens if this increases? And he said, I'm concerned about that. He said that we need to be thinking ahead. So yes, we can manage our homelessness. And I think one of the things that we need are hygiene centers and day centers in Redmond, specifically for people to go get a fresh start on their day and make sure that they get the directed to the right resources, because homelessness comes in so many different varieties. Matter of fact, when I was at the county, I worked with a group of my fellow coworkers, and we actually won the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award for 5 years' work working with victims of domestic violence. And that's where I really, got to see that you can't say, I don't even like using the word homeless. These are people without homes. Ultimately, what we want to do is find them homes, and we need something in place for that transition. And I don't think that we should ever say, rest on our heels and say, we got a great program, we're doing great. Kent's an example for the rest of the county. He is an example, but we need to think past that. We need to think into the future.
Thank you. Audience questions?
So I'm wondering who was asleep at the wheel on the senior center?
Steve, we start with you.
The mayor was asleep at the wheel. Ms. Bernie described, our current mayor as having a lot of business experience. I actually know something about his background. He had some business experience, but he didn't have a lot of business experience. And I would argue that the CEO in a strong mayor form of government, the mayor is a CEO, and they really do need to be able to have the skills and have the qualifications to manage the city and put business practices in place that would prevent something like the senior center. The senior center, you need to repeat that to yourself, is closed. And it's, in my mind, it's closed unnecessarily. And I hear all kinds of things. The design was bad. We didn't know that there was water leaking into the building. Well, we should have known. We should have absolutely had this processes in place that would do inspections. If we thought that that was a badly designed building, that's more reason to be proactive. If we had indication that there was water getting into those walls, it's not just a matter of structure, it's a matter of safety for the people who are using the senior center. I mean, when water gets into your structure, it creates toxins, it creates mold. So I'm really concerned about falling asleep. We have mismanaged a number of things. We've mismanaged, we have 20 some odd buildings that are at risk of some sort of failure. We have fallen way behind, someone mentioned earlier about parks. We have not balanced our infrastructure across our entire community. we built a downtown park way too expensive. We spent 10 years agonizing over the two-way conversion when we should have done it 10 years earlier so that we could optimize the space that we had before we built a lot of buildings. So I think that management is really important. Is that thing done, or am I still going? I have a minute? Okay, great. So are we at 3 minutes now? 3-minute question? Okay. Asleep at the wheel. I would also put this on council. Council, in my experience with it before I got on council and since I've been on council, there's a lot of pressure to just go along with what the mayor wants. And if you criticize a staff report, you're being not nice to staff. I'm never mean to staff, but I do want the answer, so I ask the questions. So there is a mindset in Redmond on the city council that your responsibility is to the mayor's office, and we're supposed to accept what he says. That's not a good form of government. We need to be the proper checks and balances. You're messing with me, man. Thank you.
Angela.
Sure. So this summer, an exterior panel fell off the side of the senior center, and we brought in investigators to find out what was going on. And they found that water had infiltrated the sides of the building and created an unsafe structure, and so they closed it. The building was built in 1989. Generally speaking, a building like that should last about 50 years. Currently, it was on schedule to have its midlife rehab done, roof improvements, plumbing, pipes, AC, HVAC, a lot of things like that, and some other improvements. And so this changed that schedule dramatically because we, as we know, do not want to go without a senior center. There were some funds that were put into it a few years ago. There was a roof leak, which is not unusual either for a building. It's unfortunate, but not unusual. And so here we are in this situation. I disagree with Mr. Fields. We did a facility study. We knew that it was on the list. We've done a lot of studying to make sure we understand our structures in our city and what we're doing. From a personal note, I will say I live in a house that was built in 1997, and we just had to get our plumbing completely redone in our house. Unexpectedly, we had a pipe leak underneath our hardwood during Christmas, and lo and behold, the plumbing that was put in there not 20 years ago was not done very well, or was not. You would not want that quality. And so we had to replace our plumbing in our house, which is not something we really wanted to do. Unfortunately, the senior center is in that state as well. It has that stucco siding, and I don't know if you remember from years ago living around here, a lot of houses were built with that stucco siding that they found out wasn't really the best thing to have in this area because it held water. You can do a lot of blame for, maybe the administration at the time didn't do a good job of hiring whatever firm it was to build the building in the first place, but I don't think that's really the right place to go with this. I think we are where we are right now, and we're evaluating what we need to do for the senior center, and we're figuring out how to do the programming that we want to do, and we're doing everything that we can to create that opportunity for seniors to collaborate, to get together, to talk, to eat together, all those things that we really need to have in our city. And it's the highest priority for me to make sure we get to a point where we have something, at least in the interim, that works a lot better than what we have right now, kind of spread out throughout the city.
Thank you.
So integrity and ethics of candidates is really important to me. And I would like to know how you would deal with a campaign worker who has lied repeatedly regarding your opponent and tried to discredit them.
Is that a question from both of us or one of us?
It's for both of you, and we start with Angela.
Well, I have a very small staff, so if I had a campaign worker that was not being truthful, they wouldn't be working with my campaign. That's not tolerated.
Okay. Steve?
Well, that's good to hear. I don't have anyone on my staff that would ever tell something that's not true. My staff is all volunteer except for my treasurer. And we go out of our way. Most of them are kids, by the way, and they're learning about government, so I feel a responsibility to show them that integrity side. But I'm going to take this moment to say that there is somebody on my opponent's staff that lied about me during my campaign 2 years ago and has again lied during this campaign. He specifically went to a political organization, Democrat. I am a Democrat, and got in front of the body and said, we think Steve Fields is actually a Republican, and he's lying to you about being a Democrat. And that was absolutely not true. I'd been a Democrat since I was in 3rd grade when my parents told me I was a Democrat. And lived those, I volunteer for McGovern, and this same individual came and apologized to me after the campaign was over, and in fact, Ms. Burney also apologized to me. I said, that's great, but you know, why'd you do it, and can it not happen again? I never really heard somebody come out in public and say, you know what, we were wrong, or we lied, or do something to set the record straight. In this campaign, Ms. Burney's campaign actually tried to undo an endorsement for me from the King County Democrats by misquoting me and saying that Steve Fields said this. And they were very foolish comments taken out of context. And the King County Democrats rejected that notion and said, no, that's wrong. Fortunately for me, I actually had the transcription of what I actually said. And I'm not perfect. I say an awful lot of things, and I look back on it and say, Jesus, well, you know, why did I choose those words? I will do that again tonight. I'm sure there's something on camera. But on this was intent. This was intent to diminish me, to discredit me, and it's wrong. And I would never do it, and I don't think it belongs in local politics, because local politics is where we have these close relationships. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna change the tone a little bit.
Are you sure we're going to change the tone?
I just have a question about PDC filing requirements and PDC reporting requirements, and how carefully you follow them.
Okay, Steve, we'll start with that one.
So I didn't quite hear the question, and I'm assuming it's for both of us. So could you
It is
repeat
for
the-
both of you. PDC
great.
filing requirements and how closely you follow them.
I have a treasurer that's been a professional treasurer for some time, and I do the very best I can. I'm not sure I understand the question, but yes, I try to understand all the rules, all the laws, and do everything I can to comply with them. I think that the PDC is an important part of our election process, and it gives people the information they want and need to say, you know, where does the, you know, it's Mark Twain said, show me where a man or a woman gets their money, and I'll show you their opinions. So I do think it's important, and I think that's one of the primary purposes. So I follow it as closely as I can. Campaigns are complex, they're difficult, especially when you're running one like me, which is basically a grassroots campaign. So I'm not perfect. I'm sure that there's some intent, given the fact that the questioner is from my opponent's campaign. So I know that there's something underneath that question. You know, maybe one of the polite things you could do is, if you see something that I missed, send me an email and I'll fix it as soon as possible. So I don't quite understand the question. I'm sure there's a foot to drop here, and have at it.
Angela?
I follow all the PDC requirements. But I do want to say something of the previous question. No one on my campaign staff did anything in regards to trying to remove an endorsement for Mr. Fields. I have just a couple of paid staff people, including my campaign manager right here, and that's not part of our goal. I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. So, but we follow the PDC rules. Thank you.
All right, thank you. What is your favorite experience in Redmond? And we're going to start with Angela.
Like now or?
You for however that you've lived here,
Okay.
pick one or two things that are your favorite. I didn't want to say favorite thing about Redmond. I didn't want to say favorite memory about Redmond. So,
Okay. There's one that's really cute. So long ago, there was some time during Derby days where they had a really long route for the parade. And one of my daughters was very tiny at the time. I think she was about 2.5 or so. And we didn't have a little tricycle, but our neighbors did. And so she rode that little big wheel the whole route. And I think it was at least a mile. It was forever. It was when it wrapped around on Redmond Way all the way to the schoolhouse. And it was so adorable, and she was so excited and had the greatest smile on her face. And then the next day, she could barely walk because she'd pedaled that whole way on her little big wheel. But I have to say that those experiences with Derby days, with our kids decorating their bikes, with going on the rides, and as they grew, things changed. And they went on the rides more. They didn't ride their bikes anymore. They hung out with their friends. They didn't want to hang out with us and all those things. But those experiences of growing up, having my kids grow up in Redmond and being able to participate in that has just been such an amazing experience. And I think I feel really fortunate that we could grow up in a community where we have events like that community can come together and do a silly thing like decorate their bikes and have a bike ride and get a little coin at the end. And they can continue to do that with their families if they so choose to live here when they get older.
thank you. Steve?
If I keep them short, can I do 3?
If you keep within the time limit, you can do as
okay.
many as you can get in the
Great,
time
great.
limit.
So, my first favorite experience was November 1995 at St. Jude's, walking out of St. Jude's Church with my wife, very recently made wife or become wife. And the sun shined on everything, and she was beautiful, and that's a moment that's very vivid in my mind. Another favorite moment for me was I coached basketball for 9 years, and my son was on the team. He wasn't a very good athlete, but he had a great spirit. And it was by the time we got to 9th grade, there was a playoff game where he was running down the court in the gym over at Redmond Junior High, and the point guard saw him running and threw an alley-oop pass, which he jumped up into the air and then put it into the basket. So that is a great moment. The whole gymnasium applauded, including the parents from the other team. It was spectacular, and it made the 9 years of coaching basketball pretty great. Can't read my own writing, sorry. The other one is similar, and I was umpiring baseball, and there was a kid from the basketball team at bat, and the count was 2-3 or something, and the pitch was thrown, and he ducked, and then got hit with the ball in the helmet. And he started to run to first base, and I said, strike 3, you're out, because he actually put his head into the strike zone. Now, why is that my favorite moment? Because years later, when I was doorbelling, I actually ran into him, and he was a big kid by then, and I said, you remember that? He goes, yeah, I remember that. And I said, well, you're still going to vote for me, right? And you're not going to punch me. And he goes, no, that was the best lesson of my life. So that's a great moment for me.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move to closing statements. You'll have 3 minutes for your closing statements. I do want to encourage everyone that if you'd like to stay afterwards and talk to the candidates or ask them questions, please do so. Please also be respectful of their time. I know when they want to get home to their families. All of their information is available in the handout as far as website and email if you do have other specific questions that you would like to ask them. We're going to go ahead and start with Steve Fields with your closing statement for 3 minutes.
So I made notes about my closing statement, but then subsequently, I had a chance to answer many of those things. In closing, I want to say this, that Redmond is at a very serious, pivotal point in our history. I respect my fellow council members. I respect Angela. I think that she is great at process and getting things done, but I don't believe that she understands what needs to happen in our city. She very much believes that we need to make incremental changes in order to make things better. I don't feel that way. I think we need to be bold, and I think things like climate change are very real, and they're going to impact our city. I think if we don't stop and take a look at how we're building our homes and how we're treating our citywide opportunities, we're going to find ourselves in worse quality of life diminishment. So I think that this is a time where we really need to step back. One of the things I advocated for 4 years ago when I was running for mayor and have been advocating ever since, and in fact our very first council retreat, I brought it up that we need a strategic plan. We need to understand all of these things, all of these, I'll use the word holistic. How do we put all of these different departments and these different needs and these different disciplines and these different leaders, how do we put them together? And so we're now doing a strategic plan. And I think once we really are honest and genuine with ourselves and finish this strategic plan, it's going to be very sobering. And we're going to need a paradigm shift in how we think and how we approach this. We need to plan big and build incrementally for a very long time. I don't think my opponent understands that. I think she believes that we're on a fine path and everything is good. We've seen a lot of turnover in Redmond, a lot of turnover, a very unusual amount of turnover at our director's level. Yes, we have all those positions filled, but we've gone months and in some cases years without that leadership in place. So we are behind, and we need to move fast, and we need a mayor who has that courage to assess and be honest and empower the people to go out and meet the community, let them be part of the problem solving, part of the problem identification, and become a city for people. And Redmond has the skills, they have the innovation, ingenuity, we have the, as we've heard, the economic health. We can do this.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. It's not very warm, but I guess we're into fall. I really feel fortunate that I have this opportunity right now in our lives. That's okay. I think Redmond is an amazing place to live. I think we have a lot of fantastic opportunities ahead of. I do think we have challenges, but I don't see it as so doom and gloom. I think that we are in a place as a city where we are a regional leader, and we'll continue to be a regional leader. I think we have amazing projects happening. We have 4 light rail stations coming to Redmond, and that's because we did plan for the future. And with that, we'll continue to plan for the future. We're going to have new growth targets that are going to come at us, and we as a community are going to have to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to continue to make Redmond an amazing place for people who live here now and who want to live here in the future. So thank you all for coming here tonight. I think that all of us together can continue to make Redmond a wonderful place. And if you want to know more information about me, I have a website, www.electangelabernie.com. I'm happy to talk to you after this as well. And I really thank you all for taking the time to be part of this democracy, because this is really what makes all of our place better, is that people want to participate in all of these local elections. So thank you all. Thank you. And thank you, Paige. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really great. And thank you, Redmond Reporter, for coming here tonight as well.
Thank you. So I have a couple of thank yous as well. Thank you to Tom Bird and Mike Rowan for running our AV and making sure that we have sound and recording and all of those great things, and for helping me with setup and takedown. I wanted to thank Marco for helping me with greeting and handing out our flyers this evening. Thank you to First Baptist Church of Redmond for giving us the meeting space. Thank you for the Redmond Reporter for live streaming, and thank you all for coming this evening. I appreciate your time. The event recording will be available on our association Facebook page as well as our website. We also have a YouTube channel. I know that it'll be live streamed on the Redmond Reporter, and they'll do all of the Facebook magic that goes along with that. We have one more candidate forum coming up, and that will be on Thursday, October 17th. That will be with all of the candidates for Redmond City Council positions 1, 3, 5, and 7. I hope you'll all plan on coming to that. Have a great evening and drive safely.